Any audio? I forget which one it is.
All right, next would be Facebook Live with a good Samsung.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
There, fixed audio.
Okay.
You guys still happy? Audio's good? There you go. Seriously good. Thanks.
Okay. So money goes from households to firms. It goes from households to companies through consumption. You buy their shit, essentially. Yeah? And then it goes from companies to households through wages. They pay you, right? So you go and work for those companies, they give you a paycheck, and it comes back into your household. Okay? That's the basics. It gets a little bit more complicated because, of course, you don't spend your entire paycheck after taxes on stuff. You save some of it, hopefully. Yeah? So that's savings. Yeah? But savings goes to investors. And where do investors put their money?
Firms.
Back into firms, right? Okay, so it stays in the flow diagram. You have this other entity here, the government, right? So the government takes money from you after your paycheck via taxes, but they put that back into the economy by government spending. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep this in mind because this is where everything hinges, right? Because if we see a decrease here, we also see a decrease on the other side. Yeah. And so we're about to dive into that's basically what a recession is. When we see a cut down on either this side or this side. Yeah. So
wouldn't the government sort of be, I might have to repeat my question. Would the government sort of be on the upside too, doing the exact same thing to households?
Yeah, well, I mean, right here it's taking the money out of, so this is the money you're getting going back to your household. And then also they take money out of firms as well. So the government takes taxes at lots of different points, but just it's at this point, it's simpler just to think about it being like there. The government takes taxes, but basically all the government takes from you, it typically puts back into the economy. Yeah? I mean, unless it's got like a huge treasury, which let's face it, no governments have that except for Norway. So yeah? Okay. So if production's increasing from firms, say for some reason they decide, the government puts a bunch of money into a firm. So they decide to build a new factory, hire 200 new workers, and produce a ton more stuff, buy a bunch more stuff. Hiring all those workers is going back into wages. And then those workers are going to say, well, I'll save some of that, but I'm going to go back out into the economy. I'm going to buy myself some more ice cream, some Jimmy Choo shoes, whatever it is. And then that goes back into the economy. Yeah, the flow movement. Isn't it?
Why?
It's true because they have a sovereign wealth fund where they have enough money to basically none of their population has to work for like 10 years because of oil and gas. But yeah, Norway will still take a hit. The savings is going to go down, but they won't be running a huge deficit.
So Norway is like Alberta, except for Alberta spent their money on dumb shit, and Norway didn't.
Norway also diversified their economy,
yes.
Right? So they started investing in other kinds of industries instead of just being in a boom and bust industry like oil and gas, which is basically all Alberta does. When we can talk about the resource curse some other day. Okay. The other really, really important diagram when it comes to economics is supply and command. Supply and demand. Trailer Park Boys reference. No, why am I putting supply? Output. What the fuck, Declan?
He's getting a phone call.
Okay. Okay. So we have one slope on the supply and demand diagram. The demand curve, right? So obviously that means if we're at this point, prices are really high, then desire for goods are super low, right? If we're at this point, prices are really low, then desire for those goods are super high. Pretty intuitive, right? If sausage goes up to like, I don't know, for $100 for like one sausage, you're going to stop buying it. Your demand for that sausage is going to go down. On the other side, you have supply. So that's the people who make the sausage. If the sausage just went up to $100 a sausage, they're going to make a lot of shit, right? They're going to make a lot of output. So that's that point. If prices are really low, they're not going to be interested in producing, and output's going to be really low. The equilibrium is when the two lines match. And that's an economy at equilibrium, is when the price that's demanded of something matches how much someone's willing to produce for that price. Yeah? Naturally, an economy moves towards this equilibrium by itself. Producers will realize they can't sell anything of that good at that price. They will lower their prices or they'll stop making it. And then consumers realize they have to pay a certain price if they want something. Yeah? Okay.
So it normally just fixes itself.
Yeah, so that's like the idea of the invisible hand, like, which is an idea from an economist called Adam Smith. And basically said that the economy typically fixes itself. That's not always true, and it's especially not true when we're in the middle of a recession. Sometimes the government has to get involved, and that's what we're about to talk about. Okay? That's not the right piece of paper. 3. Okay, so let's talk about what happened kind of starting in December, but really kicked off in the last few weeks, right? So we had this little fucker show up, right? What's this guy's name?
Corona.
Corona. I should draw it as like a beer bottle.
COVID-19.
COVID-19 rocked up, right? Okay. And then we're like, what the fuck? We're all gonna die, right? Society gets scared. Yeah. And then the government, to try and stop the spread of the virus, has to shut down production. Yeah. In restaurants, in bars, airlines no longer have any demand for their good because no one's allowed to travel, right? So production shuts down. What happens when production shut down? When we have a decrease in output, to put it in economic terms. If we think back on that flow diagram, what happens when there's a decrease in output?
We're not paying.
Yeah, wages decrease. Okay. Decrease in wages. So money stops going back to households. What happens when money stops going back to households?
We can't spend on anything. So it's just a feedback loop.
Yeah, so consumption decreases. Decrease in consumption. And we have this vicious cycle where it goes back to decrease in output. So let's say we'll take Riley, for example, right? So she's a lawyer. The courts have shut down, so you've lost some of your work. Declan's in tech. He's working from home, but for the most part, everything's fine, right? So he didn't get shut down by this initial shutdown. She doesn't work in a restaurant. She doesn't work for an airline, right? However, this decrease in output leads to decrease in wages, leads to decrease in consumption. People aren't in bars anymore. You no longer have any demand for all of those people who previously used their lawyers for bars. Or Declan, for example, you who works for Plenty of Fish, sure, you weren't initially hurt by this. However, what's going to happen is people aren't going to be able to afford to buy all those waiters, all those waitresses, all those air hostesses, all those construction workers can no longer buy the premium Plenty of Fish account, right? So they're going to start laying off because that's where all their money comes from, if this gets bad enough. So that's what we call the vicious cycle. Mm-hmm.
I love how you used household examples.
Household examples, yeah. So I mean,
really great.
because Jaden and I were here, right?
Yeah.
This is where Jaden and I are, yeah? And maybe Eric and maybe Dylan and Curtis and stuff like that. We all got shut down this initial part here, which means we can't buy. So if you previously had a Plenty of Fish premium account, no judgment, you can't, you're going to shut down your account, and that could hurt Declan's job stability. And then when Declan loses his job, he maybe won't use Riley as a lawyer, yeah? So it's a trickle down, not that, you never know, right? It's a trickle down effect, yeah? Okay, so let's look at the positive. What can we do? So where we're going to attack it, if we're the government, if we're looking at policy, if we're looking as individuals, is we have to try and mitigate this part. We can't do anything about this. We can't necessarily do anything about this. We have to try and stop this. Yeah. So that's all dependent upon aggregate demand, which is the thing we brought up first, right? So what are the components of aggregate demand? You guys remember?
Consumption.
Consumption plus investment
Government spending.
plus government spending plus.
Net exports.
Okay, so let's take this one first because this was pretty easy. Sometimes a recession was regional, sometimes it's national, and right now, like 2008, the tricky part is we're looking at a worldwide global recession. So sometimes we could pick up on the decrease in these areas, or this area particularly, we could pick up on it with exports. But currently no one can afford to buy either because Italy, Spain, China, you name it, they're all facing a pandemic. They've all shut down. They're all losing output. They're all losing wages. Yeah. So this one can't help us this time, unfortunately. I mean, China will be able to help us. They're opening back up, and China's going to start spending a ton of money in the West because their economy depends upon us being wealthy because we buy stuff from them. Their economy is like, this is huge, and these things are, and this period, these ones are pretty tiny in China. So that's why China's going to start pumping a ton of money into the West. But until China's back on its feet, we can't really do anything about that. And until factories are back open, we can't meet that demand, right? Because we can't produce it. Okay, so let's start with consumption. What can you do? Okay. If you've still got a job, spend. Yeah.
Isn't that like if you're in a deep recession, like me and Declan both have jobs,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm increasing my savings right now in case I lose my job.
Which is fair
How
enough.
do you counteract that fear during a recession that causes people to save rather than spend, even if they have steady work?
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? Because your instinctive reaction is to save because you're like, well, I could be out of work in 4 months, right? But the recession will only get worse if you don't spend. It increases your likelihood that you will be out of work. The virus will eventually be over. The problem is that so many people will be unemployed, will be unable to kickstart our economy, unable to kickstart consumption. So I'm not saying go out and spend, $50,000 on something, but that's why the Prime Minister in his speech, like last week, I can't remember which one, encouraged us to try and go and buy food at a local restaurant. Yeah, because if you can do that, then that local restaurant might, with takeout, they might manage to survive this recession. And then when COVID's over, they can jump back into it rather than being out of business and all of their staff being out of business. Yeah, so I know it's one of those situations much like social distancing where it's not necessarily in your independent best interests, but it's in society's best interests. It's tricky. And economics so often goes against the grain. So if you want to work as a society, you often have to go against what your instincts are telling you. Another example is selling stock, right? So everyone wants to sell their stock right now because they've seen it plummet. But as I pointed out at the beginning, we're going to hit a boom again. And you selling your stock is only making it worse. So hold on to it. And then when we get the boom, you'll get your prices back and we get your value back.
What if you have stock in individual companies who are now going to go under?
Who are now going to crash and burn? Yeah, you're screwed. but honestly, if you've invested in one company, typically we like to have what we call a diversified portfolio in stocks, in like investments, right? So if you do lose a huge amount of money because you invested some money in Air Canada, hopefully you also invested in Netflix, whose stock's going up, or Zoom, whose stock's going up as well, right? So maybe your losses overall won't be as big. Yeah.
My mom's wondering if she should buy more online retail therapy.
Online shopping.
Except therapy?
There are online therapy.
Online therapists. They're probably going up.
Shopping for clothes will make you feel better.
Yeah, retail. Don't. That's the thing, is that people aren't going to be buying clothes right now, even though the online stores have not shut down. People are out of work, so they can't buy stuff.
But there are certain places where we should be spending money if our goal is to be more supportive of the economy.
If you want to support your local economy, then recognize that the hardest hit industry right now is bars and restaurants, and try and order some takeout once a week. is what I would say, especially the businesses that you really want to see survive. If you agree with their business practices, if you feel that they hire a lot of people that are intrinsic to that economy, then those areas you can spend in.
Dylan's wondering if you should buy gold.
Gold's gone down. I mean, if you've got money, then it's just going to go back up, right? So the prices you're paying now, you'll get a nice return on that investment. But again, it's that independent fear as well. Be aware that you could also, even if you weren't one of the initial layoffs, you could be looking at being unemployed in the future. Not saying that will necessarily happen to Dylan, but
just does that still help when you're talking about moving your money? Or does that take your money away from ETFs or index funds?
I don't know. I'm sorry. That might be too specific of a question for me.
I think with what I've heard with those ones is that like they're all going to be down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like mine's down like, I don't know, 15% or more right now.
Yeah.
And they're expecting it to go down a total of 40%. And then it'll take 2 years probably to rebound.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that's what you have to ask yourself, right? Is can you afford to be without that money for 2 years?
Yeah.
If so, then keep it in there because the economy is going to come back. It always comes back. That's what's key to remember right now is it will come back. And certain businesses will die and they won't grow again. And what we have in economics is something called creative destruction. And this is an extreme situation of creative destruction where circumstances have forced certain industries to just go completely bankrupt and to be destroyed, and new ones will come in their place. Yeah. So what we'll probably realize when we come out of this in 2 or 3 months or maybe 4 months is there'll be industries that maybe some of us don't crave anymore. And there'll be other industries that we realize we can't do without. Yeah.
Like restaurants. Can you imagine the demand to go to have a nice meal 3 months from now?
Yeah.
It's skyrocket.
So I think
wait to go to.
I think people will go back to restaurants like crazy because people love to eat out. That's been a very ancient tradition. But there's certain things I think people will probably think, actually, you know what, I got used to living without that and I'm okay without it.
Like
you
monster truck rallies, yeah.
like monster truck rallies. I don't know. I'm going back to the first monster truck rally again. Okay.
London wants to know which stocks you should buy.
I'm not I'm not an investor guru, and I'm not about to do that.
Yeah, buy Zoom.
but okay. There's this really funny story about Zoom that I have to tell you guys. So Zoom stock has gone through the roof, right?
Can you first clarify for the old people what Zoom is?
Zoom,
the old
Declan, you
people.
can clarify what Zoom is because I probably don't understand it as well as you do.
It's a video teleconferencing company.
It's a video teleconferencing. Why are we using Zoom right now?
We should. Because I love the giant logo across your face.
So Zoom stock's gone through the roof because everyone's working from home. So suddenly there's a crazy demand for this, right? But there's another company that stock's also gone through the roof, and their name is also Zoom. So people got confused and brought that one instead of the other one. And I'll just let you guys guess what industry they're in.
Scooters?
No. Probably the worst industry that you can put money into right now.
Social gathering.
Social, but
event booking app.
they create the parts for airplane machines, for airplane engines. So people are stupid. Like Corona stock has also plummeted as well, like the Corona beer. I'm like, guys, like, do you think the Corona beer leads to
Like,
this?
I'm drinking now, but never. So.
yeah, I would take a Corona right now if I had to. Okay. That's another reason why the government has paused mortgages, right? So you've seen that as well.
That's good.
Dylan's gonna invest in cam girls.
Time to invest in cam girls.
I mean, honestly, there's a demand there, I think.
If I had money, I would invest in
Actually, are you specifically working on basically
A cam go, yeah.
Yeah.
He retracted his message.
Sell.
You're the one, and everyone else.
Okay, so the other thing the government you've seen it do is it's paused mortgages, right? Because that means that now you have more disposable income. I'm sure most of you guys know this, but disposable income is your paycheck or your wages minus your essentials. So minus taxes and then minus things like rent and kind of essential living like water, utilities, and maybe like the base of a basic level of food that you need to survive, right? So the government has now made your disposable income bigger by taking away mortgages. So in part of it's a compassionate thing for people who are going to be bankrupt and living on the street. But the other part of that is so that you guys who can afford to pay mortgages will now have more disposable income and will be able to boost consumption. Yeah, does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so the second point is government spending. Guys, think of any examples of government spending over the last 2 weeks?
EI.
Face masks.
Face masks. EI. Okay, unemployment insurance, right? So the government's basically giving us all just enough to live on. And why is that? So we can keep on consuming, so consumption can stay up, yeah? And also so that we don't all become destitute and die, but it will mitigate the effects of the recession. It'll lessen how drastic this will be. Because if people can still afford to go to the grocery store and buy food, they can still afford one takeout meal a week, then that's going to keep some things churning. So when COVID's over, which it will eventually come to the end, we're not having to fight as steep a battle to get the economy up and running again. Yeah. So EI might look like people who are leeching, but it's in your best interest, even for people who aren't out of work. Other people being on EI will keep consumption up, which will keep you in work. So this whole idea of like EI being a leeching situation, even people who don't work, it's just petty. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Is everything being followed so far? Okay. Maintains national income consumption. Okay. Infrastructure payments.
The virus.
Yes, I do have it.
Okay, so the Chinese government built a hospital. Obviously, that was to meet the demand for the pandemic that was stretching across their country. But it also employed a lot of people, right? So the government put that money up, and that meant that people now had wages and income and therefore could consume again. Yeah. And also, it just meant that firms now had more money. Yeah. So it keeps the economy going. Yeah.
And we have new shit.
And we have new shit, which we love new shit. Yeah.
We love new versions of shit.
Yeah. And then some European countries are taking this measure and they're paying employees for sick leave and paying employers to pay their employees sick leave, right? So part of that is it means that it will reduce layoffs. So if you can try and get some of those industries to keep their employees on, maybe someone like Dylan, for example, who works in construction, then that means that those people can keep consuming. But also importantly, it means that when this is all over, when we're not on, lockdown anymore, Dylan can go straight back to work the next day, right? Rather than having to retrain employees, rather than having to find new people, which costs a firm money and costs valuable time. Yeah. So if you can keep your employees on like a lesser wage, keep them on like some kind of sick pay, then it means that the second that this quarantine is over, the economy can jump right back into
We're
it.
doing that too, to an extent. We're doing payroll support.
Okay.
So the government will pay businesses a significant portion of the payroll to keep their employees on the payroll.
Yeah.
So they're not really doing anything. Like a lot of them will just be sitting at home and not doing like a bunch of stuff, but they're still. The government is paying employers to keep their employees paid. Yeah,
exactly. Because retraining costs are real and they take time and money. And it's cheaper and better than getting someone an EI. It might cost you a little bit more money, but it means that the second the economy is back up, we can get back up as well. And it means that those people who know they're still being paid for that time are going to keep consuming. Yeah. So let's say you guys did get like payroll. What did you call it? Payroll
support.
Payroll support. You'll probably keep on spending money. Whereas if you're an EI, you'll stop spending money. What was the?
Aisha has a question.
Yeah.
Why is Jaden so weird?
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Can we do a talk on that?
Next week.
Riley will do a talk on that next week. Can you guys hear the question when someone else in the room
Dylan
speaks?
just said he wants you to pitch that to his boss.
What
Payroll?
well, the government has to support because I mean a lot of businesses can't pay all their employees a month without any kind of cash flow. Because basically all businesses right now, as soon as they shut down, looking at no cash flow.
They can hear all of us.
Okay, excellent. What did I do there? Oh. Sorry, give me a second.
Which Sarah is this? Who is Sarah?
I think it's Jack, Sarah. Place your bet.
Is that
Place
Jack and
your
Sarah?
bet.
Okay, I actually don't need to say that part. That's good. Does anyone want to see it like put on a graph?
Yes.
You wanna see it on a graph?
Graphs are always good.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to do a session. I'm not going to
It's
do
Jack and Sarah. Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm
What?
just making fun of you for taking your time. Fine.
Who is Dylan?
He said, "You're doing great, by the way, Kate."
I don't know, Dylan. Maybe he's being nice. You know, Dylan's nice to me.
I thought I was watching a TED Talk.
Okay, so here we have demand.
Definitely gonna stop watching.
Why?
Because you're distracted by laughing at everyone's comments.
Comments are good.
No, I want to hear what the comments are. It's nice for me. Yeah, because then I feel like I'm actually, you know, it's not just you guys in the fucking room.
Who cares about us?
Okay. So
Special.
what we've seen, because we've seen this cut in wages and we've seen a cut in consumption, is a dramatic shift of the demand curve, right? Which has moved. This is Y1. I don't know why we call output Y, but we do. So Y1 to Y2, output's decreased. And we probably will also see prices decrease to try and tempt people into buying things. Yeah? That's the graph. Pretty simple. We can get more complicated, but then I have to introduce like aggregate supply and all this different shit. I just don't want to do that. Yeah. And this is the recession. It's kind of what a recession looks like.
So the line is moved down.
The line shifts. So the important point about the recession is the line doesn't move along the line. It doesn't move along the demand curve. It actually just shifts. The entire curve shifts.
The music's still there, just not the camera.
Your voice is a song.
Okay, you guys can still hear my voice. Cool. We just finished the graph then. That's good.
Rip live stream.
Rip live stream. Typically go down. That's what everything does. We'll see prices drop. So, I mean, if you've got a lot of money and you're a doctor or a nurse in a stable economy right now, and let's face it, doctors and nurses are the only ones that actually have job security. People have more job security than other people, but try and keep that in mind before you make big purchases. But yeah, if you have that, then buy in like a month and a half, 2 months, because we will see the housing market plummet. Yeah, not like 2008 though. It won't plummet quite to the same scale because that recession was caused by the housing market. Yes, Riley?
What about inflation? Like that tends to also happen during recessions, but it sharply increases the price of things.
Yes. So, I mean, we could be seeing a stagflation, which is like a really vicious cycle of high unemployment and high inflation. The Bank of Canada will probably try to watch that incredibly closely to make sure that doesn't happen because we don't have any wages. So we actually can't see an increase in our wages at the same time to match inflation. Oh, some of us don't have any wages. So
the Bank of Canada will watch it to make sure it doesn't happen. Doesn't the Bank of Canada kind of cause inflation?
Yeah.
Governments
So
do by printing money.
yeah, so we're about to get into that, right? Because we were talking, so I'll just talk about how the government gets its money, and then it kind of like nicely segues into investment and interest rates and stuff like that. Okay. So how does the government get its money?
Oh, Curtis has a question for you.
Yeah.
That last graph looked like the WWE, early 2000 WWE group D Generation X's logo. Do you think that's where they got it from?
I don't know that much about
It's being
WWE.
persistent, we have to ask this.
Curtis, I'm not one for conspiracy theories. I would be surprised if the WWE knows that much about economic theory or is that interested.
They're very successful.
They are very successful. You're right. I suspect that the leaders know exactly what they're talking about. No, I have no comment on that question. No comment at all.
Curtis, look at the triangle. It's the Illuminati.
She's being paid for the WWE.
Yeah.
She's on the payroll, people.
Yeah, we have an undercover spy / wrestler.
Okay, so taxation is one way. It really should be one of the primary way that a government gets its funds, right? And Keynesian economics, which is what we're looking at right now, has a rule. If you want to do things this way, if you want the government to spend your way out of a recession, which is what we're going to be doing, you've got to tax during a boom and spend during a recession. Yeah. How often do you think that actually happens?
0%.
Have we been doing that though in the last few years?
No,
Canada?
because I mean the Liberal government spent more than the Conservative government. They're less fiscally conservative, obviously.
I mean, yes and no. The 2008 crash was during the Conservative reign,
Yeah.
in which they spent a lot of money.
Yeah, to get it back up and running. I'm not saying that Trudeau's been irresponsible, but I think that if they knew this was coming, they probably would have saved more because they're going to be like going into a crazy deficit, and there will be no one to bail us out because no one else has money either, except for maybe China. The Canada is, for the most part, very fiscally responsible. It's one of the countries in the world that actually does try and follow this. The States is an example of a country that fundamentally doesn't. They spend like a big country and tax like a tiny country. The US tax rates are nothing in comparison to ours, regardless of whether they're in a boom or they're in a recession. So when Trump came to office, for example, they were in mostly a boom, but instead of increasing taxes to make up for the inevitable recession that is going to come, and the US is like headed towards a pretty big recession, regardless of this COVID thing, mostly because of their spending practices. It's just politically unpopular. No one likes their taxes to go up. And also at the same time, no one likes their social services to be cut. You have to choose one or the other, right? And Americans just don't have that understanding. They want to have the biggest military in the world. They want to have all these different things, but they're not willing to pay for it. Yes, Eric?
What would you say the gap is between boom and recession? Curtis asked.
It can be pretty small. You can be looking at a recession that lasts a couple of months, like a little dips. A lot of people in the economy won't feel it. Certain industries will feel it, certain ones won't. But we've been through recessions in the past where you wouldn't remember it. The history books aren't going to recall it, right? The recession we're walking into right now is going to be huge. It's going to be on par with 2008. I can't give you actual numbers in GDP terms, though. I'm just not very good at remembering numbers. But yeah, we're walking into a recession as big as the 2008 crash. Some people have argued we're walking into a recession as big as the Great Depression of the 1930s. I don't think we are.
Have we actually hit a recession yet?
Yeah, when all those workers got laid off, that was the start of the recession. But I mean, obviously, as people's savings account dwindle, it's just going to get worse. It's a vicious cycle, right?
For what defines a recession, or is it just an overall trend?
I'm not sure. It's a good question. I would say what you're just looking at lower levels of output.
Mm-hmm.
So output equals GDP. We measure GDP according to how much firms are producing. So we're now seeing lower levels of output. Yeah. And we're seeing increased output in certain industries, such as people who are making face masks. Like, we all know that COVID is a big conspiracy put out by Durex, the toilet paper company, because they're doing great right now. But the overall is a downward trend. Yeah. Okay. But it's also, again, creative destruction. A lot of people that are now out of work will go and find jobs in other industries that are doing well. So I'm going to go apply for a job at a grocery store, for example. Yeah. And endanger all of you guys with COVID.
Oh, no.
Curtis looked up. A recession is a business cycle contraction when there is a general decline in economic activity.
Yeah. So it's pretty broad because there's a lot of things that count as a recession. It's like the difference between a lake and like a lake and a river, like it's kind of just like blends into it. Right. You know that one side is definitely a river and you know that one side is definitely a lake, but the middle ground is kind of confusing. Yeah.
Jennifer thought it was like 3 months to become a recession is what she...
No, we have recessions that can last a couple of months, just general like small term recessions.
Okay.
But no one's necessarily writing about those. If you're watching stocks, if you watch the market closely, you'll know what we're in. But the most of us won't really feel those.
And Curtis says the UK defines it as 2 quarters of negative economic growth.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Half a year, basically.
Yeah. No, sorry. Overall economic growth, we're looking at 2 quarters of that diminishing, being cut back. Is what that means. Okay. So tax during a boom, spend during a recession. This is again against your individual interest to vote for leaders that are promising to increase taxes. But as a societal interest, it's for the best of all of us. And I really wish that political leaders could actually come forward and say, we're in a boom right now. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to increase taxes. But they know that they'll lose office. And I think it's because people don't actually understand. When they're in a boom, they forget what it's like to be in a recession. And if they had more money because they taxed more in a boom, the recession wouldn't be as hard. But everyone forgets that. We have very short-term memory. Okay. The second way we do it is by selling bonds. You probably heard a lot about this over the last few weeks because governments everywhere are selling bonds. So a government bond is a debt security. We'll go to that now. Does anyone have government bond?
I probably have some. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be in your portfolio.
RSPs.
My dad loves bonds because they're low.
Yeah.
That sounds like your dad.
Yeah.
No, it's very true. Government's not going to go out of business, right? Like, so government, you're basically buying a piece of the government, yeah? And you can buy bonds in a company as well, but the risk is always that a company is just going to like go bankrupt and you're going to lose everything. But a government's not going to go bankrupt. Eventually they will pay you back. So that's why it's a low risk bond. So low risk security. Yeah. Paid back in periods according to interest rate. And that's called a coupon, coupon payment. Yep. Okay, does that make sense? So the government's sending a lot of bonds. Yeah.
So they sell bonds with just a stake in how well they're doing.
Sorry?
It's just a stake in how well the government's doing.
It's like it's like you're investing in a company, but you're investing in the government instead. And they'll pay you back in like certain periods of time with interest, and at the end you'll get all your money back.
Derby asks, is it a
revolution a government bankruptcy?
Is that Nick?
That's
Derby. Like if a government gets completely overthrown, the new government, it's up to the new government whether they choose to honor that or not, and if they overthrow the central bank or not. And they set that up. I don't know. I'm not sure what the historical precedent for that has been.
Apparently, right now, your yield from Bank of Canada is 0.68%, half a percent. Mm-hmm. With inflation being 2 to 3%, you instantly lose money basically buying.
If you buy with the Bank of Canada. Okay. So to try and incentivize people to buy government bonds, they're going to decrease the interest rate and increase the interest rate they charge, right?
Dylan asks, it's the same idea as a GIC, but not fixed term.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry, Dylan. I'm not very good with investments.
Kate has no money. So
I've never had any money, so I've never been able to invest. I wish that someone could do a talk on this, on investments.
Yeah, Curtis, you want to do a talk on investment next week?
Is Curtis rich?
You want to answer the question, Curtis? And the last way that the government can raise money is it can print its own money. Yeah. So it's actually a little bit more complicated than just going to the print machines and printing a fuck ton more. Essentially what they do is the central bank buys a government bond. And since the central bank is kind of the government, it writes a check to itself. And bam, you've got money. You've got more money. Yeah. So the government's been doing a little bit of that. It's been creating money out of thin air. But of course, the problem with printing money is that increases the what's the word I'm looking for? Inflation. Yeah, increases inflation. Yeah,
Which
money
decreases the value.
decreases the value of
Why
money.
would they do it that way?
Why would they
Why
print
do they-
money?
Why do they buy a bond?
I don't know why they do it that way. I'm guessing because it's like multiple arms of the government. It's not as simple as just buying a bunch of shit. Yeah, so that increases the inflation rate, which decreases the value of the money in your pockets. Yeah, which is inflation is not a bad thing. Inflation just happens. It's a natural part of economics. It makes it easier for us to understand what is in demand and what is not in demand. But too high inflation rates is really bad because it basically means that the wages you get are worth less in a week's time.
Like people in the Great Depression used to burn money
Mhm.
because it cost less than buying firewood.
Yeah, or they'd have to, during the hyperinflation of like Germany in 1925, the money was just so worthless that you went back to a bartering system where you traded like eggs for bread or a basket for some, I don't know, like some wood or whatever it is, which is highly inefficient and completely halts economic productivity. Yeah. And Zimbabwe is also at hyperinflation. Okay, so all of these measures that we've talked about so far are fiscal policy, right? Which is the name we give to this kind of stuff. But when we're talking specifically about money, interest rates, that's what we call monetary policy. Yeah? Okay. So the government can also take actions that fall under monetary policy, and that's mostly got to do with the last part of the aggregate demand. So what are the components of aggregate demand? The one we haven't touched upon is investment. I'm going to go over this pretty briefly because it's already pretty long, and we're not talking about all of monetary policy. Okay, so money is a medium of exchange, a unit of account, store of value, and a standard of deferred payment. Yeah. So money, if something is money, if you can use it to get something else. Yeah. It is a store of value, and that in a week's time, the money stays the same way. And it's a unit of deferred payment in that you can use it in the future. And we've all agreed that it has a certain amount of value. It might go up a certain amount, but if you get $10 now, in 2 weeks, that $10 is probably going to be worth a very similar amount. So you can actually hold it in your pocket. Whereas if you had if bananas were money, then that thing is worth nothing in a week's time. Yeah, or like avocados when you have that tiny window when they're actually worth something. But other times, money is just supposed to stay the same, right? Okay, so does anyone know how a bank works? Just nothing complicated, just super simple how the bank works.
They borrow money from you kind of at a lower interest rate, and then you borrow from them at a higher rate.
So if we say give bank $1,000, yeah? So the bank takes that $1,000 and it doesn't just leave it. The bank typically holds on to some of that, which in most countries it holds on to about 5 to 10%.
That's just to account for withdrawals and stuff.
Yeah, for withdrawals, right? But they're really hoping you're not going to shop and take all that money out. Everyone's not going to do that because they don't have that money. You're hopefully going to take up 5 or 10%, yeah? Which is why they want you to put it in your savings account, because you can't just typically, and before online banking, you couldn't just remove money out of your savings account like that, right? Whereas now I can do that at the store, but it gets more complicated. That's why they charge me money when I do that, because I don't want you to do that. Okay, so they hold on to 10 to 5% and loan out the rest.
So, Dylan, as an explanation, you give them your money, then charge you more for your mother's or neighbor's money back with interest like crooks. That's okay.
That's basically a bank. That's not far off, but I agree they're all crooks. Okay, so they hold on to 5 to 10% and they loan out the rest. bank. Oh, so you give the bank 10% at. Do you know what the interest rate is, right? Like what an interest.
Oh my god, it's so low right now.
But do you guys remember where you put your savings in? Like how much was the interest rate a couple of months ago? No idea. I have no idea. I never have money,
I
so I
looked at
never
the
know.
interest rate on my student loan, which is prime, was like 1%.
Okay, well, you're getting like the cheapest interest rate you possibly can. You're getting a government interest rate, right?
1.3.
So they're not trying to make money
No.
on you. So let's just say an interest rate of
Don't
1.3.
think too.
say 2%. Yeah, sound good? Okay. Hold on to 10% and then out the rest. The banks charge
1.25 says Jennifer, if you're lucky.
okay. The bank charges an interest rate of 3%. When loan out your money, and then they give you so they take the difference of 1%, which is not as much as they normally take. 1%.
Oh, what is that?
They take 1% difference in profit. Yeah. And that's what we call the fractional banking system. Yeah. Makes sense? It's a little bit more complicated, but yeah. Okay, now the central bank controls the interest rate. For the most part, the banks can charge because their bank actually loans money out from the Bank of Canada, right? So the Bank of Canada charges a certain interest rate, and then they charge, when they give that money to you, they charge on top of that, right? So the central bank controls the interest rate, and if they lower the interest rate they offer to smaller regional banks or corporate banks, then those corporate banks can also decrease the interest rate they charge you.
But don't the banks have access to our money?
They have access to your money as well, but when an employer pays you, how often do they actually give you cold hard cash? Right?
Yeah.
They mostly write you a check. Yeah, they don't have the physical cash. That physical cash comes from the Bank of Canada. And the Bank of Canada says, "We'll loan you this. Will you loan you that 5%? So then you can go out and loan that to other people." Make sense? No. For how much money there is circulating in the Canadian economy, if we added up all of our money, there is not that much physical money in the economy, right? That makes sense.
What does that have to do with the Bank of Canada?
Because the Bank of Canada is the one that prints the money. They're the ones that have the physical money, yeah? So they loan a certain amount of that. When the local bank gets their cash, they, how am I putting this? That money is, and they have to keep 5 to 10% of it. That money they take out from the central bank, yeah, and then they owe that money to the central bank, and that central bank, Bank of Canada, charges them an interest rate on it. Yeah, I can't remember what the name of the interest rate is. Central bank controls the interest rate. Yeah, well they don't control exactly, because obviously every bank gives you different interest rates for different, but they own like the scope of the interest rate. Yeah. Okay. So right now, Bank of Canada. Okay, well we'll give two scenarios. Okay, the interest rate is high. What's going to happen? Let's talk about you as an individual, and then we'll talk about firms. If the interest rate's high, what are you doing with your money?
So is this the interest rate that I get on my investment, or that I get on my loan?
It's the same.
Interest rate that you get in putting, like what? Yeah. Okay.
Prime is prime.
Yeah. So if the interest rate is high, the individual is saving more, right? Yeah. And they're consuming less. Yeah. If you're a firm, also you're less incentivized to buy a house or to buy an expensive car, right? so you're consuming less. So you're low because you can also, if you don't have the physical money, it's also more expensive for you to loan out that money. Yeah. Okay.
That's in more in firms.
And if you're a firm, what are you doing with your money? Same thing, right? You're saving. But let's say you're a firm that needs a new factory and the interest rate's high. Are you going to buy the new factory, or are you going to wait 5 years and see what happens, right? So what does that mean? That means that investment goes down. Investment forms part of aggregate demand. So we see aggregate demand go down. Yeah. So consumption's gone down, investment's gone down. That happens with a high interest rate. Not a big deal, or not necessarily undesirable if we're in a boom, if the economy is doing well. But in a recession, that's not great. Yeah. So if the interest rate, so interest rates are right now lower than they've been since August 2017. And that's happened all in March. The government's decreased the interest rates. So interest rates are low. So as an individual, what are you doing? If you're an individual that's got money, what are you doing? You're spending, yeah.
Taking a loan.
Spending. Which means that you're increasing aggregate demand. Yeah.
Chris is being very supportive.
What's he saying?
You're doing very well. Very accessible.
Thanks.
And Sarah says buy houses when interest rates low.
Exactly, yeah. So you're purchasing, you're consuming.
And RAV4s.
And RAV4s.
Buy all the RAV4s.
All that
Taking out
stuff.
fat lines.
Provided, yeah, which is, scary, but that's what the government wants you to be doing right now. They want you to be spending. So maybe it's against your individual interests, but it's for society's best interests until you get to crazy levels like the States did in 2008. And if you're a firm, what are you doing if the interest rate's low?
Making that factory.
Yes, you're investing. Which means you can employ, if you've made a new factory, you've now doubled your workforce. Well, how many workforces you want, right? So which means you've just increased wages and increased consumption. Investing goes up. And consumption goes up too. Yeah? So it all leads to an increase in aggregate demand. So that's why the interest rate matters. Do I have anything else to say? Yeah.
Is it
Cool.
Is it worth paying a penalty on mortgage interest rate and renewing it at a lower rate?
I don't know. It really depends. Doesn't it really depend on what the penalty is and what the lower rate is? Like, I mean, it's not going to always be a yes or no to that, right?
Yeah, that's what Curtis just responded to.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, banks will sometimes just try to trick you, but try and think about it critically. I do think the banks are the devil. Like, I think just more like I study monetary policy, and especially when you look at the 2008 financial crisis, you're like, these guys are dicks. But yeah, cool. No one's in banking, right?
Also, Mama says the bank's closed, so she can't do anything else.
You can still online bank right now. Yeah.
I guess so.
Yeah. Because they have a pretty pivotal role to play in the economy right now. Cool. All right. Any more questions?
The Facebook stream is low quality.
The Facebook stream sucks. Facebook stream keeps falling, but it hasn't cut out once.
Any Facebook comment questions?
Is anyone on the Facebook?
Aisha was on the Facebook comment and just complained about somebody coughing.
Eric has COVID.
That's why you're not allowed to our house.
Yeah.
That's why we're live streaming it.
That's why you're not eating Cheryl's delicious desserts right now.
I
Well,
know.
that's a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great job, Kate.
I'm sorry. I wish I could ask some more of your questions about investments.
Curtis liked it a lot. And apparently Dylan, when he was making fun of you earlier, he wasn't. He was being serious. I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic.
I could tell, Dylan.
What
You're
did
very
you say?
supportive.
I have a technical
You said I was doing a
question
really
for
great job.
Jason here.
Oh. Obviously, that looks serious. Dylan's smart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Dylan's so smart.
Hear that, Dylan? Riley said you're smart. You can bank that one.
Sarah and Jack say thanks, Kate. Love Sarah.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks for tuning in. It sucks I can't offer anyone tea right now. Makes me sad.
And your
Everyone
fancy
make yourself
t-shirt.
tea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe next week we'll just like order dessert to each other. And then
Boost the economy by ordering shit online.
what are the takeaways in this
Jennifer does a
session?
great job.
It will get better.
Get over your cold before applying for your job.
Yeah. If I can apply for the grocery store and get over my cold.
Lucas is applauding.
Mm-hmm.
What would you guys rate Kate's shotgun?
Oh God. You don't have to be so supportive about that.
Sam is also applauding.
Aww. Well, how do they rate my shotgun?
I don't know. No one wants to rate your shotgun.
Is it good?
Is it really that bad?
Flag.
Oh yeah. Domino's has some good deals right now.
Curtis says poor delivery by Jaden. She can't take this ball for that shot.
Thanks, Curtis. So who's up for next week? Does anyone want to live stream one from their own home?
But they can't do it from this room. We just want to keep it.
Well, if there's only one of you, you can come do it from this room. We should just, anyone know a lot about investments?
Dylan nearly left. Let's just say I'm lucky I'm still here for seeing that guy.
And now we're gonna go to Log. Who watches Log at Christmas?